In this video, we continue our discussion on Chapter 3, in which we go over markets, whereas in our last video we went over product supply. In today's video, we seek to examine the product market for a single good or service by considering some preliminaries to then discuss market demand, as well as market supply, then put the two together to examine a market, and then conclude by defining as well as examining the equilibrium for a market. Beginning with our preliminaries, currently we are seeking to develop a product market for a single good or service, as this will serve as our base level interaction between consumers and firms, and will allow us to examine how price and quantity are determined for a sole good or service. But in order to do so, this requires us to examine both consumers and firms, which we discussed in our prior videos, as well as markets, which will be the subject of our discussions in today's and tomorrow's video. But in order to do so, we also need to look at market demand and market supply, which we'll turn to first. Starting with market demand, we have seen that for an individual product, a consumer's behavior for that product can be examined via product demand, where we have a demand curve below, where price is going to be on the vertical axis, quantity is on the horizontal axis. We have a downward sloping curve, giving us that inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded that is stated via the law of demand. However, if we seek to examine the interaction between consumers and firms over a single product, more often than not, there will be more than one consumer in the space. Therefore, we need to consider market demand as opposed to product demand, where market demand is going to be the total quantities of a good or service consumers are willing and able to buy at alternative prices in a given time period. So in this sense, it's an extension of product demand by being the sum of product demand curves for all individual consumers who are willing and able to buy a particular good or service. To illustrate this concept of market demand, let us return to our pizza example, where initially we considered a sole hungry consumer, but let us now say in the area there are two hungry consumers. So we have our first consumer, where we have their product demand curve and schedule on the left, price on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal, downward sloping curve, that inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, where at each price point we have the quantity demanded of pizza slices that this initial consumer is willing and able to purchase. Now we introduce a second consumer in the market for pizza slices, where they too also have a product demand curve, where at each price point they are willing and able to purchase some quantity of pizza slices, where we observe that product demand for our two consumers need not be the same, and this is going to be due to differences in their determinants of demand. That is, these consumers may have different preferences over pizza slices, they may have different incomes, and they may view the future in terms of their income process or the prices on pizza different. Now, turning our attention back to market demand, in order to generate market demand, this will require summing quantity demanded at each price point for our two consumers in the market, and this will generate market demand for pizza in the area. So what this means is we're going to take each price point for product demand 1 and product demand 2, and for a given price point, that'll generate quantity demanded for the overall market. So starting with point A, at a price point of $7, consumer 1 is willing and able to purchase 1 pizza slice, while consumer 2, 2 pizza slices. Therefore, market demand for pizza slices at a price point of 7 will be 3, generating us point A on our market demand curve. Now proceeding on to point B, at a price point of 5, consumer 1 is willing and able to purchase 3 slices, while consumer 2, 4 slices, where overall the market at a price point of 5 is willing and able to purchase 7 slices then, generating us point B on our market demand curve. Moving on to C, at a price point of 3, consumer 1 is willing and able to purchase 5 slices, while consumer 2 is willing and able to purchase 6 slices, such that the market will overall demand 11 pizza slices at a price point of 3, generating us point C on our market demand curve. And lastly, at a price point of 1, consumer 1 is willing and able to purchase 7 slices of pizza, while consumer 2, 8 slices, such that overall the market will demand 15 slices of pizza at a price point of 1, generating us point D, where now we have our market demand curve, where we observe that it also is downward sloping due to that inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So, with market demand considered, let us now turn our attention to market supply, where the intuition will follow closely to what we just did. So, we have seen that for an individual product, a firm's behavior for that product can be examined via product supply, where price is going to be on the vertical axis, quantity is going to be on the horizontal axis. We have an upward sloping curve due to the positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, as stated via the law of supply. And like with multiple consumers interacting for a product, more often than not, there will be more than one firm in the space as well. Therefore, we need to consider market supply, which is going to be the total quantities of a good or service firms are willing and able to sell at alternative prices in a given time period, where this is an extension of product supply by being the sum of product supply curves for all individual firms producing and selling a particular good or service. So then to illustrate this, let us return to our pizza example, but now suppose that we're looking at this from the perspective of the firms. So let us say that we have our restaurant owner who now owns 2 locations as opposed to the sole location that we were considering before. So we have our first location and we have their product supply curve and schedule, price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis, upward sloping curve, positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, where at each price point the restaurant owner is willing and able to supply a quantity of pizza slices. And now we're introducing the restaurant owner's second location for selling pizzas, where it too has a product supply curve, where at each price point it is willing and able to sell a corresponding amount of pizza slices. And like what we saw with individual product demand curves, our individual product supply curves may be different in that these 2 locations may face different production technology, that is using different types of pizza ovens. They may have different costs in terms of how they're paying their labor. They may face different regulations in terms of their tax and subsidy structures, or they may have different expectations on the future in terms of pizza prices. Then turning back to how market supply is constructed, it is done by summing quantities applied at each price point for our 2 firms, in this case locations of restaurants for this restaurant owner, and this will generate us market supply for pizza in the area. So for a given price point, we're going to sum quantity supplied for product supply 1 and product supply 2, and this will generate us a point on our market supply curve, where all points will be the market supply curve. So starting at point A, at a price point of 1, location 1 is willing and able to sell 1 pizza slice, while location 2, 3 pizza slices, such that the overall market is willing and able to sell 4 pizza slices at the price point of 1, which we generate with point A on our market supply curve. Moving on to point B, at a price point of 3, location 1 is willing and able to sell 3 slices, while location 2 willing and able to sell 5, such that the market is willing and able to sell 8 slices at the price point of 3, generating us point B on our market supply curve. Moving on to point C, at a price point of 5, location 1 is willing and able to sell 5 slices, while location 2, 7 slices, such that the overall market is willing and able to sell 12 pizza slices at the price point of 5, generating us point C on our market supply curve. Then lastly, at a price point of 7, location 1 is willing and able to sell 7 slices, while location 2, 9 slices, such that the overall market is willing and able to sell 16 pizza slices at the price point of 7. And this generates us a market supply curve, where we observe that it also is upward sloping due to the positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, as stated via the law of supply. So then, now that we've considered both market demand and market supply, let us sum the 2 together, as that will give us the interaction between consumers and firms and will generate us a market. Or in this case, it's the market for a single good or service, and since it's for a good or service, we have a product market. And in terms of our definitions, recall that a market is an institution that brings buyers and sellers together, where in this case, it's going to be the restaurant location that acts as the vehicle between interacting for the restaurant owner and the consumers in terms of buying and selling pizzas. And since we're considering pizza slices, we have a product market where finished goods and services are being bought and sold, where the finished good is the pizza slices. And this contrasts from a factor market, which are going to be where factors of production, such as labor, are bought and sold. Now, putting it all together in terms of market demand and market supply, let us graphically examine our product market for pizza slices. Price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis. We're also going to have our market schedule on the right, and there's going to be 3 possible states to consider in this market. So let us suppose that the restaurant owner has just set up shop in terms of their 2 locations and is determining the price of pizza. Initially, the restaurant owner decides to price pizza at $1 per slice for both locations, and what they observe is that they sell all of their pizza slices given that our 2 consumers are willing and able to purchase 15 slices, while the owner is only willing and able to sell 4 slices at their 2 locations jointly. So then what we have then is that consumers are willing and able to purchase more pizza slices than what's being offered. That is, quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied. So this market is in a shortage state in that there's excess demand, which we can see with our 2 points that we generated in our product market. So with this in mind, the restaurant owner then decides to increase the price of their pizza at both locations to $3. What then occurs is our 2 consumers are willing and able to purchase 11 slices of pizza, while the restaurant owner is only willing and able to sell 8 slices at both their locations, such that we still have the same case in which quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, in that the restaurant owner has sold all of their pizza, but consumers are still wanting more. With this in mind, the restaurant owner then decides to increase the price of pizza as well as offer more, such that at a price point of 4, the 2 consumers are willing and able to purchase 9 slices, while the restaurant owner is willing and able to sell 9 slices at both locations. At this price point of 4, we observe that the amount of pizza that's being offered and the amount of pizza that's being sold is just enough in that quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, and this is what's going to constitute equilibrium, in that there's no excess supply nor excess demand. However, since the restaurant owner observes that they sold all of their pizza slices, what happens if they don't observe that this is equilibrium and decide to increase the price of their pizza still? Well, at a price point of 5, what they observe is that consumers are willing and able to buy 7 slices of pizza, while the restaurant owner is willing and able to sell 12 slices at both locations. So then what happens is that quantity demanded minus quantity supplied is negative, in that the restaurant owner observes that there's 5 pizza slices that do not go sold. If the restaurant owner is still optimistic and they decide to continue in terms of increasing their pizza prices to, say, a price point of 7, what they'll see as a price point of 7, both our consumers will be willing and able to purchase 3 slices, while the restaurant owner will be willing and able to sell 16 slices. So this problem only magnifies in that now 13 slices of pizza go unsold. And we can constitute this in which there's an excess of supply being a surplus, and this occurs when quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. So then to recap these 3 states, and what we saw with our product market is that the first possible state is that a market can be in a shortage, in that there's an excess in the demand of a good or service, such that the price of a good or service is too low, which leads to consumers demanding more of the good or service than what is being supplied by firms. So to correct for this, our firms need to increase the price of the good or service up until the point of where there's a market equilibrium, that is the intersection of supply and demand, such that there is no excess supply nor excess demand, and this yields the unique price point and quantity level that's compatible with buyer and seller behavior, in that there's just enough of the product that's being bought and sold. However, if the price is above this, this will generate a surplus in the market, such that there's an excess supply of the good or service, in that the price of the good is too high, leading to firms to supply more of the good or service than what consumers are demanding, such that the firms need to respond by decreasing the price of that good or service such that the market returns back to market equilibrium. So then with our generation of a product market, as well as defining and examining market equilibrium, where we'll pick up in our next video is by examining changes in market equilibrium.